Welcome back to the Occult Rejects. Today, we're stepping into one of the oldest and strangest territories in human experience, the dream world. Not just dreams as random images in the night, not just dreams of psychology, but dreams as temple, as an initiation, as revelation, as medicine, and maybe even as contact. Our guest today is Sarah Janes, a writer, researcher, curator, and public speaker whose work focuses on the ancient history and culture of dreaming. She's known for exploring lucid dreaming, dreaming incubation, and an old sacred traditions that treated sleep not as dead time, but as a threshold between worlds. Her official bio describes her as someone who has been an enthusiastic lucid dreamer since childhood and whose work centers on the physical, emotional, creative, and spiritual potential of dreaming. She is the author of Initiation into Dream Mysteries, Drinking from the Pool of, how do you say that word? I'm so sorry.
I say Mnemosyne.
That's what I thought. I figured I'd screw that up. I meant to ask you before prior. So sorry. A book that presents dreaming as a kind of initiatory path, drawing on the mystery schools of antiquity, the Asclepian dream temple tradition, and more than a decade of research into sleep temples and esoteric dream practice. Sarah also runs Dream Mysteries, leads retreats connected to ancient incubation sanctuaries in Greece, and has been involved in projects aiming to reinvigorate dream incubation in sacred sites in the UK, including collaboration noted by her publisher and profile pages. So today we're going to talk about what dreaming meant in the ancient world, why people once traveled to sacred sites to seek healing or prophecy in sleep, whether lucid dreaming can become a spiritual discipline, and why the dream state may still be one of the most overlooked doorways in consciousness, symbol, memory, and the unseen. But before I introduce the guests, I also do have two announcements I'd like to make. On Saturday, April 25th, the Southeastern Masonic Symposium is happening at the Asheville Masonic Temple, and that is at 80 Broadway Street in Asheville, North Carolina. And I will be there in person, so come on down, meet me and the crew and the people that are speaking. And the people speaking there, we got as the keynote speaker, John Michael Greer. Then we also got Colin Conkright from American Esoteric. He's been on the show multiple times, and you'll see him again. Definitely check out his show. And we got the man himself, Ike Baker. He's been on here, and you'll see him more. And he's got an Arcanum podcast. Go check that out. And we got Tom Carter, who will be speaking there as well. So come on down. I'll be there. We'll have a blast. And also want to remind people about the website. If you're into reading, we have tons of information by multiple contributors. And we got T-shirts up on the site if you're interested. All right. Now, enough about me. Sarah, please, anything that I left out or anything that you'd like to mention, please let all the listeners know.
No, I don't think so. I think you covered it.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. One thing I did want to mention before I guess we kind of really went a little bit farther into it is if you want to promote like a little bit about your website, you do have a lot on there to offer. I don't know if you want to just give a little bit of a rundown of the website a little bit.
Yeah, so my website is actually a little bit of a mess, but it does, as you say, have a lot of stuff on it. I need to go through it and tidy it up a little bit, but
me and you both.
I am running retreats in Greece and in Turkey this year. And those retreats focus on sites that were associated with oracular and healing dreams. So we go to Delphi, we go to Livadia, where the Cave of Nightmares. There's an ancient oracle there. And where I live in Greece, actually, I'm in London at the moment, but I live in Greece half of the year in a place called Ancient Epidavros, which is where the ancient holistic healing sanctuary of Asclepius is. And it was the greatest healing sanctuary in the ancient Greek world. We know that there are at least 300 ancient Asclepions. So the Asclepion was a sanctuary for healing, and it offered a kind of really impressive multidisciplinary approach to healing. And this served as the ancient Greek hospital, if you like, but it was really more like a spa and a sanatorium and a hospital and an entertainment complex all rolled into one. And the culmination of your visit to one of these holistic healing sanctuaries would be spending time in a structure called an incubatorium, which is what people often call a sleep temple. Sorry, I just realized I was sitting on my friend's dog's tail. And in the Encumitarion, you would have your sacred sleep, encumesis, which is where hopefully you'll be visited by the god Asclepius, and he actually would heal you directly in the dream, either sort of miraculously, a kind of faith healing response by appearing to you in a dream, either in his kind of god human form, sometimes in the form of a sacred serpent. So serpents are associated with Asclepius. They were allowed like free roam around the sanctuary, and also dogs are a sacred animal of Asclepius as well. So, and he had like various family members that might appear in your dreams as well. So at these healing sanctuaries, they were actually practicing regular medicine as well. They knew lots about ancient herbs and healing treatments. They also performed operations, but there was this interesting supernatural dimension to the healing process as well.
Yeah, not to discredit the sleeping or the dreaming part of the healing, but I could be wrong. I think I might have covered it on one of my shows when I was talking about like how light or colored light can be used. I might be confused if it was this, but I think they might have also had like sun coming in through like green glass, maybe shining on the people while they're sleeping. Do you know anything about that?
I've not seen it that anywhere. I mean, where I go to visit quite often, the Encumitarion, and you've got 2 layers of building. Different things happened in different Asclepions. So that may have been a later invention potentially. The Romans still celebrated Asclepius, so I could imagine that might have been the sort of thing that they might have incorporated into Asclepions in Italy and other sites. I don't know of it happening in Greece, although I know they were making coloured glass in that period, so it is possible.
Yeah, I can't remember honestly. It was so many shows I've done. They all sort to mash into one. One question I did want to ask, I guess, kind of like to break it off, to start it off. For people hearing your name for the first time, like I guess, like who are you and what first pulled you so deeply into dreams?
Well, like you said in my bio, I just always had like really amazing lucid dreams since I was very, very small, like really small, and really life enriching dreams as well, you know. And what really got me into wanting to study it, or at least wanting to research more about it, and generally just really appreciate the fact that I have lucid dreams, was I've got an 18-year-old daughter, and when she was born, my ability to dream, I just didn't sleep enough, so I lost my lucid dreams for maybe a year or maybe a little bit more. And when I got it back, I was so grateful and so aware of what a difference it was making to the quality of my life to have dreams versus not having dreams. I sort of realized how important it is for people, and also the nature or the style maybe of my dreams after that as well became more interesting in lots of ways, because I was so grateful, and because I was so I'd missed it so much. When I found myself in the dream space, I would really analyze and explore it and try to understand why and how it worked. Whereas before that, lucid dreams had always been something I did for fun and wish fulfillment, and I hadn't really philosophically thought about it too much. A little bit. I've always been quite philosophical, but you know, getting them back, I just really, really appreciated them.
When at one point, did you think it was never coming back because it had been so long?
I didn't think it would never come back. I guess I was, you know, busy, didn't really have too much time to think about it. So they just incrementally came back. So, you know, when my daughter was really, really small, I felt like I wasn't sleeping at all, like not at all. And I felt that experience of dream life and waking life kind of blending as well, which was actually quite scary. But when I got like my dreaming ability back to something I was used to, I was really happy about it. And then I had worked as a music promoter, like a gig promoter, where I was living in Southeast England, and I was promoting mostly psychedelic American bands And because I didn't really want to stay up late with a young daughter and do that kind of a thing, I thought I would quite like to go back. Well, I never went to university, actually. I thought I'd like to go to university and maybe study instead. But I didn't have any money. And when I went to lectures, I thought, actually, they're kind of like stuffy lectures. And the lecturers are often like less open in a university setting than they are when you meet them off the university campus. So I went to a couple of lectures where the same lecturers that I'd seen at university were talking informally to groups upstairs in pubs and stuff. And I realized that when they're upstairs in pubs or when they're not at university, they actually go a bit more off-piste, which is more interesting to me, and say what they really think. And so I asked a load of people if they would come and give talks about subjects that I was particularly interested in. So I was like cherry picking things that I was really interested in, like sex robots, psychedelic science, DMT entities, anything sort of weird, wonderful, dream related, the psychedelic. I've never actually taken psychedelics, but psychedelic experiences are very
interesting,
very similar to me, or sound very similar to me, to dream experiences. So all these kinds of people I got to basically come and give a talk at my friend's house, and I just gave them 100 quid, and everyone who came, all my friends came and chipped in a bit of cash, and we made dinner, and it was like a really nice little social thing. And I had about 25 people that would come every time, and we ended up having this weird bespoke kind of oddball university level education on just really niche subjects. And yeah, it was amazing. Really, really good.
Yeah, that is really cool. Wow, that is impressive. Good for you. That must have been like a cool experience.
Yeah, it was amazing. And then through that, I met loads of friends that I've ended up working with. And, you know, like we talked about those panel conversations I'm organizing. A lot of those people are people that I met whilst I was doing that lecture series.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, that is really awesome. I know you mentioned a few times about these experiences of childhood. Did you even? How long did it take for you to realize like this may not be like normal?
Yeah, that's a good question. I was always quite attracted to people that were into weird stuff like me as well. So, and I always had very intense, close relationships, and a lot of my friends were more into the same sorts of things as me. I think like one thing that made me realize, and I was already in my 20s by this point, is one of my best mates said to me that I was writing for the Idler magazine, and I would write these long, complex dream diaries with these narratives and weird, surreal scenes, and very intense, kind of quite graphic imagery, like something like a sort of Jodorowsky film or something. And I remember my friend Matt reading them, saying, I never have dreams like that. My dreams are like just shapes, or like, I can't remember whether he said they were not even color, they were black and white, but something like that, something really, really simple. So I appreciated that it was fairly unusual. One of the things that was amazing was, so during the course of me doing this lecture series that I was telling you about, I met Anthony Peake, who wrote a lot of books about the possibility of life after death, and all kinds of like parapsychological behavior and all this sort of stuff. And I was his kind of co-host on his chat show we were doing on YouTube. And he told me we're going to interview this woman called Rebecca Sharrock, who has something called highly superior autobiographical memory, which means that she remembers everything. And when he told me about that, I was like, oh, that's cool, because that must mean that she remembers. She's like lucid in all of her dreams, because being lucid is really remembering who and where you are. And when we interviewed her, it was like the first thing I asked her, and she was like, yeah, all of her dreams are lucid. And then I remember these dreams of, I must have been a toddler, that they were all white. And I wanted to see if she had these dreams as well. And she did have these dreams. And she thinks she can remember being in the womb. She thinks she can remember that experience. So yeah, that was absolutely fascinating. And since then, I've been contacted by quite a few people who said they remember these like baby or toddler dreams when they were all just pure white.
That is interesting. That is wild. I know I could be wrong. I'm pretty sure it's on your website. When you use the phrase dream mysteries, what do you mean by that exactly?
Well, actually, that was something that my publisher made me change my book title to, because they didn't think Americans would be able to pronounce Mnemosyne. And not many people can, actually. And I'm not even sure that I'm doing it right. So it's probably reasonable. I wanted to call it Drinking from the Pool of Mnemosyne. And they're like, no way. So dream mysteries, because it's supposed to be like a self-initiatory process where every chapter is separated into like a particular era and exploring the evidence for dream rituals, because it's pretty consistent across human history that human beings have had sort of rituals whereby they dream intentionally for specific purposes. Dream incubation's like quite consistent. So every chapter is a particular time period or era or culture. And then when I wrote the chapter, I would do like a dream incubation practice and dream on the research that I'd made, dream on the stuff that I'd written about. And then I would dream that I was there. And then I turned that into like a little micro scene, not really even a story, but like a kind of micro scene setting where the reader can be the protagonist imaginatively in that setting. And I think for me, like, I always have preferred reading fiction over nonfiction. I love reading story and getting into character and seeing scenery and description. And I think that also helps you to have more of a engagement with the text. Like, there's a lot of studies into how when people read novels, they actually create neural pathways or new neural pathways and new neural connections where essentially they've sort of imaginatively actually lived this dreamed scene, which is so interesting. So I
Especially if
wanted
you visualize it. I feel like if you like kind of visualize it, it really makes it more like you did experience it, even though you weren't.
Exactly. And when you're reading fiction, you do that. And when you're reading nonfiction, you don't tend to do it quite so much. Yeah, exactly.
That is really cool. Something you kind of just said now that I was like, oh, damn, that's impressive. So you can kind of like set yourself up into like the type of dream you're going to go into.
Yeah, very often now, like, it's the main thing that I kind of do with dreaming. Like, one thing I've felt getting older, I'm 48 now, and I found that as I get older and I'm a bit more like know myself and not such an emotional wreck, my dreams are like more peaceful and more consistent with who I am. And I do think that that's, generally speaking, what tends to happen is you become more in sync with your dream self. So now when I dream, I like kind of almost experience what I experience in normal life, which was never the case when I was like a teenager or 20s or even 30s. It was like dramatic, intense, emotional, nearly always positive, but very, very complex and full of riddles and traveling to exotic destinations. And now what I try to do is dream more intentionally, and like, especially if I'm researching something, I will kind of meditate on it as I'm falling asleep and then try to find out answers. So I'm interested in using dreams for that reason as well. It's to like try to, dreams are amazing for making interesting novel associations. Like, that's what dreams do. So I think it's really useful for problem solving. And they do say that lucid dreamers tend to be better problem solvers than non-lucid dreamers. And one other thing that's interesting about lucid dreamers, and I know it's true of myself, is there's a theory that people that who lucid dream a lot had a kind of stressful home life sometimes. It's not always the case, but that they didn't ever really feel like they could completely relax. So they'd always be on a slightly sort of alert, shallow sleep, which would give them longer stretches of REM. And it was a bit true of me, because my mum and dad are quite shouty, and I always felt a bit like a spider on a spider's web, like really aware of everything that was going on in the house. And my dad also made me a cabin bed that I couldn't completely relax in, because if I rolled over, I would fall out of the cabin bed and like fall onto the floor. So I sort of, part of developing lucid dreaming, I remember it from being very, very young, but especially when I had my bed that was a cabin bed, it was like even more intense.
It was really interesting. I was just looking up. I think I had told you like a week ago. I was like looking up stuff on dreams and experiments, and there was one. I don't know if it had something to do with lucid dreaming. I don't remember. I was looking at so many of them. But one were really interesting. It was they were doing studies with people, and then when they hit REM sleep, some people were like still like I guess half in this world of conscious to where they could ask them, if you hear us, move your eye back and forth a certain amount of times or whatever. And the people would respond. And they're like, what the fuck? Yeah, that's weird.
That was the experiment conducted to prove that lucid dreaming was a, I don't know, bona fide state of consciousness. So,
so you know what I was talking about.
Yeah. It was
That's cool.
Stephen LaBerge is often credited with that discovery, but there was also a scientist in England who was working on it at the same time. And I think he was the first person to discover it. And they basically were using EEG so they could measure the brainwaves and they could confirm that the person was indeed asleep. But they agreed on this ocular signaling beforehand, and the participants were able to do that. It was really it's very interesting. And then now I've got a friend actually who is working on dream communication. So experienced lucid dreamers asleep are sent recorded messages, like voice messages usually, and then they experience it as maybe like picking up the telephone and in their dream and hearing the message, and then are able to communicate on the other side that they heard it. Really interesting. Yeah,
this is wild.
And he's also this guy, Daniel Aldous, that I know in America, who's doing all these dream communication experiments. One of the things, because I spoke to him, I had this dream about him. I mean, they say you probably shouldn't tell people you have dreams about them. It depends what happens, I guess. But I had this dream about Daniel Aldous, and I was working on a film. I always wanted to be a film director as a kid. And it is because I wanted to make my dreams into cinema, because I just thought everyone should see this, like so cool. So I had a dream that I was working with Daniel Aldous to make a film that was called a secret or a new science of deep sleep or something like that. I forget what the title was now, but it was basically about deep sleep was this next level of dreaming. And if you could become conscious in deep sleep, if you become lucid in deep sleep, like what we would typically call non-REM sleep, that you can access these other universes and things like that. So I contacted him and I told him about, and we had this conversation. And I said, oh, what are you working on at the moment? And he was working on recording dream speech, or trying to record dream speech. So I didn't know this. And that I've been keeping tabs on like dream stuff ever since I was a kid. Like there's not much stuff that makes me think, wow, like this is a totally new thing, because lots of things come around over and over again. But he said he was working on this project using electromyography. So very, very sensitive equipment to pick up the micro movements in your voice box. Because when you speak in a dream, your voice box actually makes not necessarily corresponding, but tiny micro movements happen in your voice box when you're having a conversation. And I said, have you used lucid dreamers? Because if you use lucid dreamers, you can kind of conjure up a bit more power in the voice box and articulate and enunciate your words a bit more clearly. So maybe you'd get better results. And that night when I went to sleep, I had this lucid dream that I was standing in Times Square in New York, and I was just looking around and I was remembering Daniel telling me and me telling him about you should have lucid dreamers so they can really enunciate and pronounce and shout the words more clearly. And so I was going, this is amazing. And I was trying to really make my voice box like make all the right movements. And it occurred to me that this is what you're feeling if you know that experience of being stuck in a nightmare and you scream, but all that comes out is a little like meep, or you feel a kind of something happening in your voice box, but it's like not enough power to, and then that's can also be what causes anxiety. So yeah, I thought that was really, really fascinating. And I've seen there's been various. I kind of think these days that the technological approach to dreaming, like trying to induce lucid dreams or recording dreams or dreams being shared by multiple participants, anything that requires like wires, I'm not so interested in anymore. Like, I'm really interested in the like creative and joy enhancing aspects of dreaming. I think science, it's a bit like science and psychedelics. It takes it, generally speaking, some step closer to monetization. And once you start monetizing these kind of altered life enhancing states, I think it can get a bit complicated and is open to corruption. Like, just look at the psychedelic scene now. It's like,
oh, you think that got corrupted?
yeah.
So do I. It just seems to be a thing people don't want to talk about. But I wanted to ask you a little silly question, maybe, but I wonder. Did you ever see the movie Dreamscape?
Dreamscape. I have seen that one. Dreamscape.
I wonder if that's possible, where you're able to go into other people's dreams. I mean,
well, there's that Paprika, but the one that I loved, which isn't really technically about dreams, but sort of is, but basically this inspired, when you think you've got like a really unique personality and all your ideas are your own, and then you watch a film that you watched when you were about 8 and you're like, oh shit, like all of my ideas came from like this advert or this film. And there's a film, I used to always forget what it was called because it's got a really unexciting title. It's called Brainstorm. And it was about this woman. It's the woman who plays Nurse Ratched in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. And she is an inventor of this machine that can record your memories. And she dies on it. And someone in her lab like puts it on and they experience. And I just thought that film was an amazing idea. And it was what made me, I always wanted to make a machine that could record your dreams. But I think that, the kinds of devices that are now being used to record dreams and the method is a bit too kind of like AI-y. It's not really going to be it can't ever really be what the dreams look like, but it's approximations or guesses or, and I really hate AI. So I think AI art looks really ugly. So, I'm not so bothered about it these days.
Another question that I had, a lot of people kind of think of dreams as either like brain noise or personal symbolism, or maybe a way of like, your brain disregarding junk. What do you think the ancient world understood about dreams that the modern culture might have forgotten?
I think that what you definitely see in ancient dream interpretation and ancient dream texts is that there was this just everyday mundane consensus that dreams reveal the future, which is amazing. Like, it's an area of study and an aspect of ancient thought that seems understudied and undervalued, because that really reveals so much about ancient ideas about time and reality. So ancient Egyptian, ancient Mesopotamian, ancient Greek thought all consistently interpret dreams with the explicit goal of predicting what's going to happen in the future. And dreams present information in an oracular way, rather than seeing like a kind of video recording of what's going to happen in the future. It's clues and hints. And so it reveals this oracular way of viewing the entire world and our experiences all the time, which I think is really interesting. I mean, my real passion is trying to get into the mindset of ancient people, like imagining the technology and the material culture of a particular time, and imagining what your perspective, your experience, and your perception would be of your place in space and time. But we're so used to our particular level of development or cultural norms, that it can be quite hard for people to imagine what it was like when, there were no mirrors, for example. I'm really interested in the technology of mirrors and the technology of language and words. Before we had words, before we had language, before we had all these kind of very, very ordinary conventions that we take for granted. I think words and language and script are a form of magic, a form of the most powerful magic human beings have ever had. And they are hugely important when it comes to dream interpretation as well. So I think this, the development of early dream cultures combined with language is this really potent oracular form. And you see that across the board. It's like dreams are very, very, very significant.
Thank you. You mentioned this earlier, and so did I. And I'm pretty sure there's plenty of people that don't know what it means. What is a dream incubation, and how would you explain it to someone who has never heard the term before?
Dream incubation, when I write about it in the book, is because it was an ancient practice to receive a gift, usually, or information from either a dead person or a divine entity. But in its essential nature is that it's an intentional, ritualized dream experience. So you go through the same kind of processes you would for any sort of ritual, purification, some sort of fumigation, perhaps an offering, a sacrifice. Sleeping in a prescribed place is very important. So what we have is a tradition of temple sleep in very early ancient Egypt, ancient Mesopotamia, ancient Anatolia, where a temple dedicated to a particular deity is recognized as being like their abode on earth. And if you sleep in that place, it's recognized that you will be able to contact them in your sleep.
That is cool. Not random question. You did mention it yourself. Just not to put you on the spot, though. But you mentioned fumigation. Do you happen to know offhand what they normally used for that?
Frankincense in Greece. There's various different resins. Frankincense is a favored incense. Is described as being like the god's favorite fumigation by there's a Persian writer that writes about how it's like the favorite smoke of the gods. Frankincense is really good, actually, because it's mildly psychoactive. And one thing you know, if you meditate with like a kind of thick fumigation of good quality frankincense, you'll notice that you get more kind of visual complexity and depth sometimes. So I think it's really useful for dreams, especially for encouraging that hypnagogic stage when you're entering into sleep. It's really good for that. And then there is some really interesting recipes in ancient Egypt. There are also things like opium, which we know was being used as a fumigation in Manoa, in Crete and in mainland Greece. And opium was used in the Asclepians, in the Eleusinian Mysteries. And in Crete, they found opium pipes and opium fumigation vessels as well.
Oh, wow. Damn, okay. Opium. I guess it works, right?
And then, also Syrian rue. Syrian rue is really good, actually, as a fumigation. And even now, people still use it in places like Egypt and Iran, and Turkey as well, to ward off evil spirits. So there's this idea in Mesopotamia and in Egypt and Greece that demons, and demons can be good or bad, are elementals, and they're usually like made of an airy substance. So one reason why we use fumigation is to clear space and make it ritually pure, because we don't want any evil air entities in there. But also the fumigation acts to attract the gods, because they love the smell of it, and they'll come down to you. In Mesopotamia, the Epic of Gilgamesh, I interviewed a Danish Assyriologist, and he was telling me that in the Epic of Gilgamesh, Enkidu makes Gilgamesh a temporary dream incubation structure. Like it's like a reed hut that is encircled with a circle of flower, and it's called a house of Zikiku. And Zikiku can be a personified dream. It can be the god of dreams, and it's also a book where they record all the dream omens in as well. So it was, dreaming was really super important there as well.
Oh, wow. Do you happen to know any of the like, do they actually like do like rituals and like ceremonies for any of this stuff too?
Yeah, there's loads for all different purposes. I mean, one thought is that in Mesopotamia and in Anatolia, bad dreams, nightmares are thought to shorten your life, so you really don't want to do them. So a lot of spells are about dispelling nightmares or sleep charms to attract pleasant dreams. People were terrified of nightmares, and if you look into ancient Egyptian ideas about dreaming, it's because people believed that dreams weren't generated from within you, that they were entities that came upon you at night. And if you think a nightmare's that, then it makes it a lot scarier than like, oh, I'm just like dealing with some unresolved issues. Like people would be terrified of them. So in Egypt, they made these little clay rearing cobras to ward off evil spirits that would approach them at night. And night was considered to be this kind of like vulnerable, scary time in some respects, because you were, if you imagine like lying prone in an altered state, easy to attack. I think it's also why dogs are often very closely associated with these temples where they practice sacred sleep, because dogs protect sleepers and they could obviously alert the sleepers. And people do find that they sleep more deeply if they have a dog with them, because they feel protected and they feel safe.
Oh, wow. That was interesting with the dog. I didn't even think of that. What drew you specifically to the Asclepian tradition and the world of sacred sleep?
Well, when I was running my lecture series, one of my guests was Dr. David Luke, or Professor David Luke now, who's at the University of Greenwich, and he specializes in exceptional human experience. He's actually just got funding to do a study into precognitive lucid dreams. So we're running a retreat together in May where we visit the Oracle of Delphi and all these other places that are associated with precognitive dreaming.
That is cool.
Yeah, he gave a talk about DMT entities, and we got into the subject of lucid dreaming as well. And he was telling me about a sleep temple that he had visited with a Mexican shaman. And it was in England, because the idea that you could receive healing in your dreams was something that kind of went on for a really long time. It transferred to Christianity and Orthodox Christianity in Greece and Russia and places like this as well. And he went to a sleep temple that was in Gloucestershire. And it's really cool because it's this British Romano sleep temple that was dedicated to a Celtic god called Nodens. And it's all centered around a sacred well, as a lot of these healing sanctuaries are related to healing waters. And Tolkien actually worked on this dig with Tessa and Mortimer Wheeler, who are the archaeologists. And he was inspired to write I always call it Lord of My Ring, but it's not called that. Lord of the Rings. And because they found this curse tablet there that said, if you don't return my ring, I'm going to curse you forever. And he got the idea for that. And because he was really interested in etymology and Old Norse, he got loads of ideas for the book and the different characters. And that hillside where the sleep temple was kind of full of holes and passageways, because it had been mined. And there were all these like local folklore legends about little people that lived there as well. So yeah, there's a sleep temple in Gloucestershire on the edge between England and Wales. And Dave told me all about that. And I was like, oh, I want to go there. And I was actually doing like Tinder and stuff at the time. And I only dated people who are archaeologists. And one of them, I was like, oh, I could get them to take me to the sleep temple. So I did. And actually the sleep temple was closed. It's on like a like posh estate, and it's private property. and they only open once a year for a rhododendron festival, but we didn't know this. So we went up there, and luckily, because this person I was with was an archaeologist, we actually managed to be let in. And I even got the key to go into, there's a little like private museum there that you can let yourself into. And I got the key and could go around there and look on my own. It was amazing, really cool.
Nice. All right, that's funny. You only dated an archaeologist?
Yeah, well, you know,
there's not many around to choose from. I feel like that kind of narrows down your.
Yeah, but I'm mostly interested in like learning stuff.
No, I know. I just thought that was funny.
It was handy.
Yeah. No, I was just thinking if I did that, I don't think I'd know anybody. All right. Your book. You talk about Nemesis, if I said that right. Mm-hmm. Memory and the dream world together. Why is memory why do you think memory is such a crucial part of dream work? Well, dreaming and memory is really weird and interesting, isn't it? Because you think about how one of the defining characteristics of lucid dreaming actually is that those dreams don't evaporate upon waking. So that sets them apart in an interesting way. But for an ordinary dream, they often evaporate upon waking, which is so weird because you're engrossed in this like can be quite intense, amazing experience, and then suddenly it evaporates. Like, how weird is that? And then one thing I find with recalling dreams is I tend to work backwards, and it's almost like you kind of remember and recalibrate the dream in your memory in the process of writing it down. And lucid dreaming for me is remembering who and where you are in a dream. And so it's intimately entangled with memory. And I think it's really peculiar that neuroscientists don't study dreaming more. Like, for example, in dementia, many dementia patients can be nonverbal, absolutely not know where they are when they're awake, and in dreams can be heard to speak just normally to people that they remember. So something's happening in dream states for those patients. And I know there are a few researchers that are doing research into that, but it's really fascinating. So I think memory and lucid dreaming especially are super interesting. But I think, sometimes I have dreams where in the dream space, I can remember other dreams that happened decades ago. And I have this access to this almost like tsunami of dream memory that I couldn't even compute in waking reality, or, it would be, it sort of seems like too much information. And one thing people say about lucid dreaming as well, and if you've ever had a lucid dream, you probably had this experience of you get overwhelmed, and this sort of feeling of the overwhelming feeling of being aware in a dream wakes you up. It's like you get too stimulated by being lucid in the dream. And I think part of that is too much memory, waking you up, too much remembering where and who you are. So yeah, I think dreaming and memory are really interesting. Thank you. Do you know, I'm sure you know who Giordano Bruno is? Yeah. Do you think like any of his the memory stuff he was working on might have like helped with dreams and stuff, or did it include anything with dreams? I can't remember. I don't know if you know about it. No, I don't know. I mean, I think there are loads of authors. There's loads of people that I read sometimes, and often I think authors hint at the fact that they are lucid dreamers. And one of my favorite authors for that is actually Lewis Carroll, Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. I just think he had a lot of experience with lucid dreaming because the way Alice navigates that space is very typical of a lucid dream, like trying to remember who she is, everything being kind of like cryptic and riddled, and scenes blending into one another. Like, it's very reminiscent of a lucid dream. Yeah, didn't you have he was the first one, Alice in Wonderland syndrome, right? Lewis Carroll. Yeah. That's interesting. The guy's an interesting character himself. All right. How do you distinguish between an ordinary dream, a lucid dream, and what an ancient person might have called a true dream? So when
when people talk, in the ancient world, they didn't have the word lucid, but they had this idea of a true dream or a divine dream. And when they talk about true dreams, specifically in Greece, often, like in the context of, there's this one particular dream oracle god called Amphiaraos, who was worshipped at a sanctuary just north of Athens. And he was kind of famous for providing people who went on pilgrimage to his sanctuary with true dreams. And this just means that they're real and they can be trusted. So they give you good advice, give you good counsel, tell you what to do. So there's that oracular nature to them. And when you read ancient descriptions of dreams, they sound lucid, especially when people are encountering gods and goddesses. They sound, if you think about it, like one thing I often say to people with lucid dreaming is, quite often lucid dreaming will happen if you've got a crush on someone, or if you really love someone, you really desire someone. When you see them in your dream, you get like a heightened sense of arousal, and that heightened sense of arousal alerts you to the fact that you're dreaming and you're with the object of your desire in a dream. So I can imagine that for ancient people, they have wanted to see a particular god or goddess. They have gone to sleep praying to that god or goddess, like desiring to see that god or goddess. So when they appear, they're going to be very excited, and that excitement probably would wake them up in the dream to the fact that they're dreaming. So there's an example of a man in Egypt who had a dream encounter with the goddess Hathor, and he was at a festival of drunkenness. And they had this festival where people would get drunk on beer that had been dyed red, and it
Hathor, yeah.
tied into that myth of the priests dyeing beer red to get her drunk. And
yeah, she was like killing people, like wasn't she like Sekhmet at that point or something like that? Yeah.
So she's very bloodthirsty. She drinks this beer dyed red, and then she falls into like a drunken stupor sleep. So the idea was like resonating with that somehow. And a lot of people had these kind of half asleep dream visions and encounters with the goddess. And he erects this stele where he describes this kind of erotic sounding dream that he has with Hathor. And he talks about how he feels like ecstasy and bliss. And I think that's a feature very often of lucid dreaming, is like ecstasy and bliss, because there is something so expansive and transcendental about being in a lucid dream, where you realize you are the entire complex dream scene, and you're not just an avatar plonked into a computer game. You are like everything. And you say, for example, if you want to fly, when you really examine the mechanisms of flying, you're not flying through this you're not necessarily flying through a space. You're the air that lifts you up as well. You're the actual texture of the wind and the clouds and everything. So there's something very expansive and very joyful about lucid dreaming. I think that's really, that's a big part of why it's good.
Lisa, thank you. In your research, what are some of the most compelling ancient examples of dreams being used as medicine or guidance?
There's a whole class of inscriptions called the Yamata at the ancient Asclepion of Epidavros, which is where I live, and they all detail dreams where the god has appeared to a patient, and sometimes he performs some sort of physically impossible operation on the patient, like chopping the head off, tipping out a load of bees and then sewing it on. There's a woman who reports going in there and that she was pregnant for 4 years, and then she went to the sanctuary and she gave birth to a healthy 4-year-old boy who proceeded to wash and dress himself and make himself dinner. And there are some that sound like very supernatural, and then there are some that sound like I've got a friend who's a philologist and a classicist, and he studied the Yamata, and he thinks that enkymesis, this sacred sleep, is basically anesthetized sleep. So we know they were using, they were anesthetizing people in ancient Greece. They were combining mandrake root and wine, steeping bruised mandrake root in wine. Dioscorides writes about it. And that would serve to anesthetize someone so they could be operated upon. And one of the descriptions in the Amateur describe a patient basically waking up mid-operation, fighting off the priests that are holding him down, and then being resedated and then waking up and being okay again. But there's lots of evidence of surgical implements and all sorts of stuff. So I think definitely anesthetic materials are used, but I don't think it's the only way that these healing dreams happen. I think that for some people, they will just happen spontaneously as well, because they're very devoted, because these dreams are happening also when they're not even in the sanctuary, when they're just at home. And in that instance, generally speaking, they weren't being operated upon.
Thank you. How much of dream work do you think depends on ritual preparation before sleep?
I mean, the ritual preparation is something that can make dreams more intentional. But, like I say to people that come to workshops and retreats, you can really work hard to have a lucid dream. And then sometimes they can just happen spontaneously as well. And one thing that I find to be very, very conducive to lucid dreaming is experiencing joy and happiness and awe in life. It's like those neurochemicals, we tend to associate them with certain experiences. So our brains are trying to often reconjure up the highest peak experiences of joy and bliss for us. And sometimes I have those dreams where I'm like, oh, my brain is so good to me, like gives me these special experiences. But I do find that the more joy, bliss, ecstasy, freedom we experience, the more that's reflected in dreams. But also you get the opposite happen. You have a compensatory dreams. If you have a very boring life, I think part of the reason why I got so into dreaming was I grew up in a really boring town. I felt frustrated and bored, and I had an active imagination, and dreaming was an escape thing for me. Like, I was really happy dreaming because the adventures that I went on were so incredibly real feeling that I was satisfied by it. And I think there was an element of that for me that was a compensatory thing. And I always read from a very young age. My mum taught me to read before I went to school. So I always read books. And I do think that reading novels is one of the things that's the easiest way to start encouraging more complex dreaming, because you're actively imagining yourself in these other places, and it can be really great. And then choose to read exciting, exotic, beautiful books rather than scary, horror, terrifying books. Like sense. The Collector by John Fowles. Don't read that.
I think that start reading books like that. Yeah, I can see that helping.
I like magical realism. Like, magical realism is my favorite genre. It's really good for lucid dreams, I think.
I can see that, yeah. I think you might have maybe kind of answered this a little bit, but it's kind of like leads into it. And I do wonder if it's kind of something just to help you maybe stay more specific. But what role do you think symbols, offerings, prayer, or intention play before entering sleep?
I think, it's a bit like psychedelic experiences for me, dreams. Like, I know a lot of people who work in the dream arena, and I know a lot of people that work in the psychedelic arena, and I see a lot of similarities. So if I know someone really well and they tell me 50 Shades, yeah, actually that would work very well, because, well, it depends whether you find it sexy or not. But if you found it sexy, then that would work very well, because that sort of sexual energy is really useful, that that kind of like lustful desire feeling. If you read erotic things, I think it actually can work very well. What was I saying? I can't remember now, actually.
Oh, sorry, I screwed you all up with that comment. Well, all right, I'll give you.
So one thing I noticed working between the dream space and the psychedelic space, I'm doing an event for the Psychedelic Society tomorrow, is
Right.
that I've always considered dreams, because I was always into films and I wanted to be a film director. And I think that all came from the fact that I was really into dreaming, is that my dreams are like my oeuvre. And I think I know a lot of people that work in dreams, like say, for example, I really like Robert Moss as well. And I can tell a Robert Moss dream it's him. He's very well educated, knows so much about mythology, and his dreams have this wonderful, sophisticated complexity because of that. And then when people are into other stuff and they have a different aesthetic, they have their dreams as well. They're like film directors of dreams. And then I see the same in the psychedelic scene as well, like depending upon what people are into, what their aesthetic is, what their belief system are, their psychedelic experiences are like their imaginal oeuvre as well, to some extent. It's all coming through the filter of the personality a little bit. And maybe not even necessarily filtered through the personality, but interpreted by the personality. So I do think that people have like their own unique signature on these imaginal experiences very often.
I know you mentioned that you go to like specific places. Do you think that with these sacred places, do you think where you sleep changes what kind of dream contact becomes possible?
Yeah, there's a tradition in ancient Mycenaean ritual buildings and oracular structures or oracular locations that they build over fault scarps. And I do weirdly notice that in volcanic regions, there are more intense dreams. I think they knew something about certain geomagnetic anomalies where I live in Epidavros. One thing I notice is it's a mildly volcanic region at the moment, and it used to be more in ancient times. And I just sleep like a log there. And lots of people that come on my retreat say the same thing. And I live in a little bungalow there. And one thing I notice is that a lot of cultures, a lot of interesting spiritual cultures, especially cultures that honor underworld deities, arise in volcanic regions. And you think, well, that makes so much sense, because if you live in a volcanic region, you can literally feel the earth breathing, and the earth has these kind of temper tantrums and these mood swings, and energy comes out from underneath the earth. If you live in England, which is very non-volcanic, you don't tend to have such a belief in the underworld power or the underworld gods or any threat coming from the underground either. But for people that grew up in those, grew up and cultured in those volcanic regions, is quite different. But yeah, I really noticed where I live that I sleep really deeply. It's got this amazing stillness about it. And then every now and again, you feel like a ripple of underground activity, and it feels like you get a much greater sense of the earth being this living entity.
I never thought of that. That is a really interesting way to look at it. Have you, just wondering, from going to all these places, have you ever noticed kind of like patterns in what people encounter in those settings, like healing dreams and ancestral dreams, deity dreams, archetypal stuff?
I have always had dreams about Apollo when I'm in Delphi, and always had dreams about light. And the last time I was there, I had a really good dream about Apollo and the island of oh God, I've forgotten. Delos, the island of Delos. And it was weird actually, because the driver, because I rent a coach and it drives all the participants everywhere, and we nearly always have the same driver, and he's lovely, and we always get chatting, and he really likes our groups. And he was telling me that there was a study into where on the earth receives the most sunlight, and he said that Delos was one of those locations, which is amazing because it is the birth of light, because it's where Apollo is born as the god of the sun. And that night I had a dream that I was with Apollo, and we went to the island of Delos, and the whole island of Delos was just this pure white shining marble island. and the whole scene was just infused with this brilliant white light. And there's something about Delphi, because you've got Mount Parnassus, which is this very awe-inspiring, towering, intense feeling entity, and you have the Sanctuary of Apollo moving up the slope of Parnassus, and then you've got this very deep, steep drop to the left, and the village of Delphi is actually tiny, just sort of hugging the cliff, and it just makes you feel sort of slightly disorientated, because your body is kind of pulling down and up simultaneously. So I just always have really intense dreams whenever I'm there, and I always dream of Apollo. And Apollo has, out of all of the Greek gods, appeared in my dreams most often. I am born the 22nd of June, though, so I studied ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs and was delighted to discover that my name sort of means child of the sun, which is true because I love the sun.
That is wild. That is cool. All right. Somebody was actually, I guess, asking in the chat. This was an interesting question. I guess they wanted to explore more about planned rituals before sleep, like to observe dreams with specific genres or of books and record them. Like, I guess maybe is there like maybe some sort of setup you can kind of explain that might help with people?
One thing that I think can be really helpful is writing, like that sort of old school analog writing, not using your phone, not having your phone in your bedroom at all, and I do believe there's a connection between the fine motor skills required to write using pen and paper, and also just the way your brain works when you record something like that. I noticed that people tend to recall more information, or always recall more information, if they use pen and paper rather than trying to record it in a phone. There's a different process that happens. And also because your brain is, all the neural connections are kind of all across your brain, the more you activate the regions of your brain that are associated with recording, the more you're able to access those memories from the dream. So I think that's really important. But one thing you can do is start off by keeping a daily diary. Like every single day, write down what happened during the day, and do it at night backwards, as if you were recording what happened during a dream. And then as you're recording it, analyze it as if it were a dream, so that, you know, you encounter a particular person, think about what that person represents. They're a real person, but think about how you would approach it if it were a dream. And then it's a boring technology, but I actually think it's not a boring technology at all, but it's something that people can't believe makes that much difference. But if you get into a regular habit of properly writing down your dreams, keeping a diary, keeping that diary by your bed, always thinking that you're going to jot everything down into it, you will notice like a massive improvement in your memory. One thing also can be really useful is recording your historical dreams. So all of your best dreams, make sure they're all written down and look through them and see. Very often you'll find, you know, I've done one of these Oracle Dream retreats before with Gary Lackman, who's written a book about precognitive dreaming, and lots of different books about people like Madame Blavatsky and Steiner. And he's been recording his own dreams for 40 years and has tracked them to see how they've been precognitive. And also Eric Wargo took part in that retreat as well. He joined us virtually, and he wrote a book about time loops and about how there are these little bits of information that we don't think are important necessarily in dreams, but if we record them, we see that there is definitely evidence for the future being revealed in them. And if you think, you know, for thousands of years, ancient people, it was just normal, totally accepted that dreams reveal the future. Maybe they were onto something, and I know they were.
Yeah, I have heard, I would assume even maybe, you know, from like the occult, even I think that has even always been suggested to write down your dreams. I just remember that as a practice too. And I do think from my experience, when I did do that, it seemed like my memory of the dreams got better.
Yeah, it definitely does. It definitely does.
There's something weird about it, but it works.
Yeah, and I think one thing I've thought, because I have wondered, wonder why I always had lucid dreams, why I always had this really intense dream life. I am left-handed as well, and I wondered whether there might be a handedness to it. And I always drew a lot. I always drew a lot of pictures. I was writing relentlessly as a kid, as a teenager. And I think that those two things. So one of the things we do on the retreats is lots of drawing and writing and using those old technologies. And I think it's part of the reason why so many people are experiencing lack of dreams now, is because of dependence on screens and phones, and not like people just not writing, not drawing ever.
No, I agree with that. I even wonder if like the focusing on the writing somehow also goes back to like focusing in your brain, and that's why you can actually.
Yeah, it's like the process of actually writing is so different. I thought about all kinds of ways of like what are the mechanisms, but if you think like writing words out is so different to tap 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 on a, like, it's such a different movement. And when you are writing the sounds out, you're actually making the shape of every letter, tiny micro movements. You're making it, so that's real writing. And tap writing can't ever be real. It's unmagical. So yeah, I think
even with me with texting, with the way we have autocorrect, I mean, half the time I'm just flinging my thumbs, getting close to the letters, and it fixes it for me. You know, so, I mean, I'm not even tapping the keyboard correctly either.
Yeah.
So yeah, total difference. Yeah, I think something definitely behind that. I think that's a great advice. How do you approach the line between scholarship and personal experience? Because dreaming is one of those areas where history, myth, and lived encounter kind of collide.
I think so. Whilst I was running my lecture series during lockdown, it moved online and it focused mostly on Egyptology, because there'd been some of the most popular lectures we'd had. And I got absolutely obsessed with Egyptology, started learning hieroglyphs, started recording videos for children during lockdown where we did like ancient Egyptian arts and crafts and things like that. Really love it. Although I actually hate going to Egypt, but I love the ancient culture, is amazing. And the ancient technology of script is extraordinary. I'm running a course at the moment called Dream Hieroglyphs, where we do one hieroglyph every session for 2 hours. And then we use that as a kind of dream target. And they're just fascinating. I think they've got real magical powers. And most of the hieroglyphs we're studying are what we would call the amuletic hieroglyphs. So they are the hieroglyphs that aren't just a sound or a word value, but they have like a protective function, or they have some magical function. And once I started to learn hieroglyphs, I noticed that they were appearing in my dreams a lot, and they just are very conducive and very sympathetic to the way that we dream, because hieroglyphs are phonetic, they are symbolic, and they are magical all at the same time. So you get hieroglyphs that represent just phonetic values. You get hieroglyphs that just represent the thing that they actually are. And then you get these more sort of metaphysical hieroglyphs that mean something philosophical or spiritual or religious. And I just find them fascinating. And what you find when you start learning ancient Egyptian words and you start seeing ancient Egyptian words written out is that scribes spent over 8 years learning the arts of language, script, and writing in the houses of life. And you can't help but make associations, like visually, phonetically, and more complex even than that. So it almost represents to me like a kind of holographic script, because each sign is this entryway into a whole world of signs. And I've thought a lot as well about how scribes in ancient Egypt, because the hieroglyphs are the real things, or they are real things in the world. And in ancient Egypt, the hieroglyphs are called Medu-Neja, the God's words. The real things of the world are speaking to them. So they literally have a dialogue with the world all the time, because everything in the world is revealing itself all the time. And I often think that as a scribe, sometimes you might be walking down your a road and a few things line up so that you can actually read a word, that, you know, you see the sun, then you see a cat, then you see this, and reading it all together, the God is directly speaking to you. And so I think there's something really magical about that. And then ancient Greek represents this bridge between the real things of the world and the hieroglyphs and this Egyptian's understanding, and communicating in more abstract forms. But you look at Greek as well, and ancient Greek is like a kind of Lego language where little components can be added together to reveal the essence of something. So say, for example, chrysanthemum is what we call a particular type of flower, but for a Greek person, it just means golden flower. So it does exactly what it says on the tin. It's like pure and self-revealing. Whereas to understand English, you have to understand the roots, and the roots of English are usually, well, they could be Germanic, they could be Latin, they could be Greek, and they're very often Greek when it comes to nature and science.
Thank you. I really like that. I think I have like one more question and then we'll wrap it up, and then probably easier question for you, shorter maybe. I'm pretty sure some of the stuff we spoke about was probably in your book. If people were to go check your book out or checked out your work, what is like one thing you hope people take away from it?
How life enriching dreams are. Like, they are so life enriching. And whether you're looking at that in terms of, like, one thing I find, so my retreats are really interesting, and I get usually 50-50 men and women, which everyone's like, how do you get blokes to come on your retreats? But, you know, because most people think of retreats as being like women being goddesses or, you know, whatever. And I'm not like that. And everyone that knows me knows that I'm not like that.
No,
and so my retreats are fun, and it's about dreams being creative and how life enriching they can be, and how important it is to be like joyous and appreciative of nature. So for me, it's that they can be massively life enriching. So a lot of the people that come on the retreats are artists, because they want to, you know, get more inspiration out of their dreams.
Nice. Well, thank you very much. This was a really interesting episode. I really glad I got you on. Yeah, there was other things you talked about that maybe in the future I'd be really interested maybe to have you talk about the Egyptian hieroglyphs, or something that, you know,
yeah, great, I'd love to.
Yeah, that is, I've never had anybody on for that. That'd be wild. But again, thank you very much. The chat loved it as well, so I really appreciate it. Again, you want to promote like this roundtable type thing you're doing again?
Oh yeah, sure. So I don't really know how it started, but I just, like I was saying, through running my lecture series, I've met a lot of amazing people over the years and become friends with them. And then I wanted to do a panel on the egregore, because I was getting a bit swept up in the current news, and I just really thought about how powerful like the thought forms we're creating are, and how they are possessing people and taking people over. So I thought egregore would be a great subject. So we did that one. And then that led on to a talk about entities, and a talk about sacrifice. And the next one I have, and the panels have been amazing. Like the panel we had yesterday for entity was just incredible. I had like 20 panelists for everything from like Ethiopian amulet scrolls and magic, Tsar rituals, Haitian voodoo. We had a Hecate priestess, like so many different people. Someone who's got temporal lobe epilepsy and has had a daemon since they were 4 years old. It was fascinating. And the next one we're doing, I'm collaborating with my friend Pascal Michael, and we are going to do the psyop, because, you know, I guess that's the thing. Is like I've got really, looking at the news now, I'm really interested in how language manipulates people.
Oh my God.
And it's so, I haven't really watched TV, or it's so horribly, disgustingly transparent how we are manipulated all the time through advertising, through news agencies. And now that the news, and they always have done, but perhaps it's just being done less cleverly now, but they are making us wage war on one another.
Yeah.
So I'm really, really passionate about just people actually getting together and talking in real life. That's why it's so important for me to do retreats, because I want people to actually come and be in this amazing place and meet real people, and people often become good friends as a result of it. And like, I'm actually staying at my friend's house, and she was one of the people who came on my last retreat. Like, people develop proper relationships, and they don't all agree with one another necessarily, but I think people always used to be able to hold conversations with someone they didn't agree with, and now that seems impossible. It's bizarre. And so I want to do the psyop, because I think that psyop has been this kind of like fantasy Hollywood thing for such a long time, but actually it's part of our everyday life. And it's important that we're very mindful of it. And I watched this guy, James Corbett, who's a researcher and does a lot of research into psychological operations. And, you know, he gave this rather depressing analysis of what's happening at the moment with Iran and America. But at the end, he was asked, like, what's your message for people? And he just said, the most important thing is that you don't lose your humanity, because that's what they want. And it's just so important to keep talking to people and not think you hate anyone just because you're being told to hate someone, and keep engaging with real people and real living things. And so that's what I'm really trying to do with this, although it's over Zoom, but it's in-person conversation, listening to lots of different people from lots of different disciplines. And I think that it's much better than just being spoon-fed propaganda and carefully constructed news speak and double speak, which, you know, the whole Trump and Pete Hegseth recently, I'm like, how is this even possible? It's like the most bizarre, blatant double speak, weird. I thought they might have been drugged. Like, it doesn't make any sense.
It's getting very, very weird.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, I totally agree. I one of the reasons why I had started this show is that, like, you know, when I got heavily into the occult and I was in the OTO for a minute, I really wasn't kind of paying attention to the outside world. I was studying magic and rituals and all that stuff. And eventually, once I started coming back around and like kind of poking my head out, and I started like putting on the news and the politics, like what you said, like due to like neuro-linguistic programming, what do you want to call it? I was just like, yo, we're fucked. I was like, it's like this. Like, it was so blatant to me now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was like, yo, this is not good. I was like, we're really being mind fucked by the TV.
Yeah.
And social media.
That's why I think I mean, you just have to look at the fact that social media people don't let their children have devices at all. They know, like, and it's written into, I think James Corbett, this interview I was telling you about, he was talking about it's actually written into their, like, I don't know, manifesto or their business plan, that they ultimately affect the evolution of the human being. Like, they want to create addiction. And I find it so depressing. And it's so, because it's happened so incrementally and sort of subtly, to think that, you know, you're sitting on a bus or you're sitting on the tube and every single person is just totally transfixed by this screen. It is so gross. If you had someone come back from like 100 years ago and saw this, there's an episode of Star Trek. Do you know Star Trek? It's an episode of Star Trek called The Game, where they're all addicted. They've got these little glasses on. They're all addicted to like throwing this ball in this net, and and it releases like this little bit of serotonin, and they're trying to get everyone on it, and it's a way of distracting them from other bad stuff happening. And it's like, yeah, that's what's happening now, but I don't know. I don't know how we get out of it. I honestly don't. But I think one of the other topics we're going to do on our panels is beauty. And I think that is something that has greatly suffered at the hands of this horrible, destructive, addictive device thing. Is we aren't building, or not in the West, not in America, not in England, like these great temples, these great structures that are acts of adoring the harmonic principles of nature. Like that's what people need to do. I wish that we could do that without thinking that God means we've got to kill other people. Like, oh, that would be so good, wouldn't it? If the same God that we're all worshipping didn't want us to all kill each other, it would be amazing.
Right? What a novel idea. Thank you again so much for coming on. Really look forward to this to that roundtable episode when you do it. Anything else that you want to plug? You want to plug your website, podcast, your show, or anything before?
My website is themysteries.org, and then that is, as I say, it's got everything on it. I organized it a little bit.
Oh no, I didn't think it was bad. It's just you do have a lot of stuff on it.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff.
Yeah, this woman's very busy. So thank you again so much. I really enjoyed this. It was a great interview, a great time. And again, everybody in the chat, thank you so much. And that's why we go live. Hopefully I have another conversation with you again in the future. And until the next one, everybody be well.